Where was the Van der Zand bit? Did you use that in your copy?
No.
Looking at our weather forecast, it shows a Pacific frontal system crossing the interior. That's bringing snow and clouds into the region. On the south coast, an active frontal system will spread rain and showers tonight and tomorrow. And as far as the forecasts are concerned, looking at the far north, first of all, cloudy with snow and snowy periods and lows of -9 and highs of 3. The interior will be sunny with cloudy periods, lows -4 and highs of 0. And for the south coast, clouds and rain, lows of 3 and highs of 9 degrees. We'll have another report from the Liberal Convention in Ottawa as John Turner faces his moment of truth tomorrow, and we'll have more on the government report on spending at 6 o'clock on tonight's news hour. Jack's focus is on labor tonight. He'll be here in seconds.
Good evening. It says here that Premier Van der Zand will not allow British Columbia to be held to ransom by people like this and the labor unions. We'll get down to that after you've had the rundown from Steve.
A fight is brewing over who should fish for profit in BC's rivers. Is it the territory of the native people or non-native commercial fishermen? Bob Gould stands to lose his fish processing business on the Skeena, and Paddy Greene represents the Pacific Fishermen's Defense Alliance. And coming up, what will happen to Canada's Western Bank now that it's in the hands of Far Eastern bankers? Was a takeover by the Hong Kong Bank of Canada a good deal? The NDP's Ian Waddell doesn't think so, and he's here to explain why. But first, Operation Solidarity took to the streets in 1983 to fight the social credit government. At the head of the marches was BC Federation of Labour President Art Kube. He's stepping down next week, but not without a parting shot at BC's biggest employers.
We have lost 70,000 full-time jobs in the last 4 years in this province. This carnage has to stop, and if we have to go against the wall, so we will.
And Art Kube is in the studio now with Webster.
And that sounds like tough talk. As a matter of fact, Mr. Kube of the BC Federation of Labour, when we scheduled this interview, it was to be your swan song. A nice swan song in which you'll be stepping down next week from your top job in the BC Federation of Labour. I presume you're still going to step down.
Oh, yes. I'm not running for re-election, and I wish I could go out in a very peaceful atmosphere, but you know, it's okay for the Premier to say that I'm trying to hold the province up to ransom, but what he has allowed now for the last 3 months is to get basically 3 multinational corporations to hold the province up for ransom and create all that hardship and the suffering.
Oh, well, let's stop for a moment. I mean, hyperbole is fine, but don't try and tell me that Van der Zand is pulling the strings behind Macmillan and Waddell and whatnot to keep the strike going.
No.
He wants to settle that strike.
No. It's not him who pulls the string. It's Macmillan, Waddell, and the other multinational corporation who pull his strings. Because, you know, look, Jack,
I'd like to know how his strings are being... He was a friend of Labour, Hodgson, former IWA official, good friend of the left wing in Canada, appointed as chairman of the commission, who came in with a recommendation.
Well, Jack...
We're talking about the IWA strike, by the way.
Yeah, Jack, just look, there are always 2 sides to a story. I presume that Stu Hodgins had some sympathy and empathy for workers as long as they signed his paycheck. But that's over 20 years ago. Right now, he's a bagman for Grace McCarthy. Everybody knows.
He's not a bagman. He doesn't collect money for her.
Yes, he does.
He does not. He works for the Transit Authority.
Hey, look, Jack.
Oh, don't come here and spread your libels and slanders. Let's get down to cases.
Jack, he has lost any sympathy he might have had for working people a long, long time ago.
Well, that's a different way to say it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your opinion.
No,
Fair
but you know, you started the other way too, that he was some sort of great hero to working people in this province.
Now, let's say the point is that Monroe and his executive have recommended total rejection of the Hodgson package.
That's right, and we are supporting the regional council in that position wholeheartedly because it's a catastrophe. The report is a catastrophe, and it would set workers in this province back to pre-union days, Jack.
Well, it doesn't affect the money levels of workers.
Look, it's not the question of
We're
money,
not
it's the
gonna
question of the number of full-time people in the industry. That's what the strike is all about. And if the recommendations would be implemented, the only thing which would happen, I guarantee you, you would see most likely another reduction of maybe 15 to 18% of full-time workers in the industry in the next 2 years.
Okay, let me give you a sociological question. While I may have some sympathy, we all have sympathy with the 20,000 people who've lost their jobs due to markets and increased efficiency prior to the present strike. 20,000 IWA people.
Well,
are you not exhibiting the classic, what's the word, Neanderthal attitude of the labor boss who says, nothing will change. Maximum number of men for minimum number of jobs.
Jack, if there is one union who basically has recognized that technological change has to come to an industry and was generally very supportive of the process, it's been the IWA, okay? But what they're basically saying, that shaking out process has to stop somewhere. That resource here in British Columbia has to maintain a number of people in employment. We can't continue to export logs, to export cans, and export jobs. And what they're saying to the industry, Jack, is that from now on, okay, before you contract out, you have to be able to prove to us that that is absolutely necessary. Basically what they're saying, they're agreeing with Justice Hutchins' report.
Justice Hutchin was not Mr. Hodgson.
No, you see, that's the problem. And when I accused the Premier of bias intervention and dispute, you see, once Justice Hutchins' language and Monroe's language didn't suit the industry, then the Premier went shopping for somebody who might be suitable to the industry.
You're not here really to discuss the IWA strike except for your hyperbole that it turns back the trade union clock 50 years.
That's right.
I want to ask you, are you prepared again to go through the old caper of threatening general strikes, illegal walkouts, and all kinds of things to force a settlement which you cannot achieve by these methods?
No, what I'm basically saying is that if the IWA requires assistance to win that strike, we will give them every assistance necessary to win that strike. That strike can be resolved relatively quickly to collective bargaining. That strike could have been settled 2 months ago, because you know, and everyone in know knows, that the northern interior settled. The southern interior was prepared to settle till Van der Sande whipped him into line with FIR.
But you know that the IWA made a tactical mistake in allowing a number of the middle-sized companies to continue to work, thereby reducing the pressure on the big boys.
Well, look, I mean, hindsight is always better than foresight, but it doesn't help the dispute.
No, but what can you do? You're on the outside.
Well, look, basically what we're saying here, we're basically saying there are ways and means to apply additional pressure. We already started to apply additional pressures. As you know, 2 mills are down because they can't get any IWA logs, okay? We can intensify that sort of pressure, you know? There can be a cutoff of supplies. I'm not saying that we have to do anything very drastic. All what we're basically saying, the industry has to come to their senses, and the Premier has to recognize that if people are out on strike for 4 bloody months, you don't get a commission, which comes with a settlement which is completely unacceptable, which is a total and complete sellout to the industry.
But no talk of any regional general strikes or any of that nonsense from you. Things are bad enough in BC.
Look, things are bad enough, but I tell you, there are 20,000 people in this province going around who 4 years ago had full-time employment in that industry. I don't see anyone trying to say we're going to do something for these people. The industry is profitable. It's not a question of the industry going under. You got their financial reports a short time ago. They can afford. The IWA isn't asking for any money. The IWA is basically saying, the people who are working in the industry now should have a reasonable amount of job security.
Just by the way, has your successor been named, or is it still in
Well,
the
no, there's an
talking
election.
situation?
There's an election, which is
It's
Thursday.
all fixed, though.
Well, no, well, it looks like there's a consensus around Ken Giorgetti. I think he's a
From
young
the guy from Trail?
Yeah, young guy.
fella.
Yeah.
Steel workers?
Yeah, yeah.
Middle of the road, or is he as far left as you are?
Oh, I'm the. Oh well, okay. Listen, I tell you, I always wanted you to just tell me that I'm the great left winger.
Tell Art Kube what you think of he and his tactics, whether you're for them or against them, after the break. I'm telling you, I do wish this IWA thing could be settled and straightened away. Go ahead, please, to Art Kube.
Hello, gentlemen.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that this is a super town. We've got a port, raw materials, everything going for it. It should be a boom town. Until the attitude of labor changes here, this is the last place in the world anyone would want to invest any money.
Ain't that the
And
truth?
good riddance,
Well, I
Mr.
tell you,
Kube.
Hong Kong is a great boom town too. It's a nice town and everything else. It's a nice place to visit, but I'm not so sure I would want to be a worker and live there.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Go ahead.
How are you doing this evening?
Fine.
I'd just like to ask Mr. Kube, in regards to wages, is it the high cost of producing lumber here into finished product more expensive, and the reason why logs are going in raw product south of the border?
That's not true. The thing is that our lumber is very, very competitive on the international market. Labor costs in this province and the productivity is one of the highest in the world.
Yeah, I believe that to be correct from both sides. The employers as well will agree with that. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Art. You're
Yes.
so concerned about having the worker making $40,000 a year. What about the person investing in the stock market and they lose? Would would you like to see the IWA woodworkers share in the loss accordingly with the big companies' shareholders or not?
Listen, the IWA members have been losing now for a long time. And if you take the average wages of IWA members, it's nowhere near $40,000.
That's not the point he was making.
No, but the point is that people in the forest industry have been going through very massive layoffs. That there are 20,000 people who have lost their jobs in the last 3 years. So anyone who tries to tell me that the workers in the industry aren't suffering, I tell you, I know a hell of a lot of more workers who are suffering in this province who are on unemployment and welfare than stockbrokers and stock speculators.
Art, are we not sufficiently sophisticated and intelligent now that after 100 years of trade union organization and fighting,
Yes.
that the time has come when we can actually not sit down and share the pie in a more reasonable way? Because obviously all of our resource industries are going to...
Look, who is more reasonable of all the unions in British Columbia than the IWA? The IWA didn't go and say we want a buck an hour, we want this and we want that. The only thing they said, it's just about time that our people should have a fair sense of job security.
Job security is the issue. And
That's right.
The point is that the employers are looking for increased efficiency, smaller staff, contracting out,
But
right
what
or
the-
wrong,
what
or
do you
they,
think-
they say they can't
Listen,
survive in the world market.
That's bull. Look, that's bull, Jack.
You can't say it's bull.
Yes, it is, Jack, and I tell you why. Because the industry has again shown that it's profitable. The industry has reduced their labor force by about 20,000, has increased output, is extremely competitive on the international market. But I tell you, I see a great number of people who got hurt in that shaking out process.
But we're back up in the old tribal dispute, head on, no way out except pressure and strikes. Is that right?
Look, I'm basically
I'm not blaming either side.
No.
I'm
But
saying
look,
that-
if there wouldn't been an intervention, I think that there would have been a resolution. But you have to
You mean if
understand.
Van der Zam had kept his nose out?
That's right. Look, you know that the small producers in British Columbia want an agreement. It's the big boys who are controlled outside of this province who are holding up the settlement. Everybody knows that.
You're blaming Zimmerman, everything on Zimmerman.
Well, I tell you, the ghost of J.R. Murdoch must be with him.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Kube. My father works in the industry as well, and he's been out for at least, 7 or 8 months now, and he's starving on $50 a month or $50 every 2 weeks. Now, when they had a strike on the shore workers, the government legislated him back to work right away because it was a necessary thing to do. We need our ports. Now, why won't Van der Zalm legislate the workers back to work? Not because the workers want to go back to work, because the big brass in the industry want to starve them to death.
Look, nobody wants to be out on strike. I mean, look, if you don't think that I have some real feeling for the people who've been suffering like your father, but that's what the fight is all about.
Yeah, but
because
the government is being forced not to legislate the people back to work.
Look,
because the big brass...
Just a minute, we'll have to clear
But
this
on
up.
what basis would they legislate them back? You know, I'm not in favor of legislating anyone back, but at least in terms of longshore, there's some protection there. Because if they legislate them back on the basis of the report, the Industrial Inquiry Commission, I tell you, the carnage of full-time employment in the industry is going to continue. And more people in this province going to be working part-time, being unemployed and on welfare.
Okay. The point I was going to make, you know, because I don't accept all of your wordiness, was that Hodgson didn't know whether he was coming or going with his commission, because one day...
Well, maybe he was.
Just a minute. One day Van der Zalm was saying, I'm going to legislate them back. And the next day he was saying he wasn't going to legislate them back. And that would make it difficult to apply pressure. Okay, next call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello, Jack and Art. I'd just like to point out that it's not just the IWA worker that's involved in this. There's a lot of spin-off jobs involved. And in my own industry in particular, as a matter of fact, we've really slowed down due to the IWA strike. But I would just like to say that I support what Art Kube is trying to do here in supporting of the IWA, because if the IWA loses on this, then we all lose. And I would also like to add that, you know, some of the reporters I see on especially Channel 8 do seem to lean towards the right on a lot of these issues, and it is disturbing to me.
Lean to the right?
Well, I don't in any way blame the press for in that dispute. I think the press played it very decent. But I do blame the intervention by Will Van der Zalm, because I tell you, the way it looked to me that somebody started to pull the strings, because on the beginning of the dispute, he all at once was very reasonable and very friendly disposed to the problems of contracting out, what it created for workers. But I tell you, he should change his tunes after the election.
Don't forget, he settled the BCGEU strike the moment he came in.
Yeah, well, I tell you.
Go ahead for Mackenzie.
You have 2 hours tonight?
Hello.
Go ahead for Mackenzie.
Yes, gentlemen, just 2 small comments only. All we're hearing lately is about the IWA, the IWA.
No, I know there's a
what about the little
PPWC.
old town in the North Country called Mackenzie?
Look, I know the PPWC is fighting the same fight.
You've got 571 sawmill workers out of work.
Look.
We've got down 250 pulp mill workers. We got the bush workers are down. We're talking 1,000 people or more, and all we listen to is the IWA, the IWA.
Just a minute, though. You don't get a vote on the Hodgson report, of course.
I beg your pardon, sir?
You don't have any vote in the current IWA dispute.
No, we haven't.
No,
and,
but
and that's what disturbs us, Jack.
No,
that's all
but
we're listening to is the IWA.
Look.
When on TV last night on the news, it's
look,
the
I
pulp
made
unions
mention.
were there on television, and they said they're going to back the IWA, and we're members of the pulp unions, and we don't hear nothing from these guys.
Well, look, I made a mention of the PPWC strike up in Mackenzie, because your issues are exactly the same issues which are in dispute in the IWA strike. And so, you know, look, you're not forgotten. But let me tell you, if the IWA loses on that issue, I'm sure you don't expect to win then, do you?
I wonder. But anyway, my second comment, you were on the Jack Webster show here a month or so back, and you were saying that you were going to do something and help the IWA in the forest industry. But listening to that, and I'm a union man myself, and all the way. But I really believe the Federation of Labor. I honestly believe now, listening to this for the last couple of months, you people are gutless. Let's get on with this. Let's do it. Go for it 100%. So a couple of our leaders are going to be put in jail for a day or two or whatever the heck. We're going to get you out on bail anyway. So let's go for it. Do it and get the people back to work. That's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 1 minute, one call. Invitation to go to jail. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I got 2 comments to make here. The particular industry that I'm involved in, we went through the same thing about 4 or 5 years ago. We were in dispute for 13 weeks in regards to contracting out. We got some fairly decent protection. I know doggone well the company's going to come after us again, sooner or later. The next thing is, the other comment is that I've got to agree with Kube in regards to the Hutchin report. He brought down a report that was favorable to the union's point of view. Very little was done or said by Van der Zam. He shopped around. He's got another one. It's favorable to the companies, and now that's the one he's going to sit with. I think it stinks. Jack, you're not as up on these issues as you seem to think you are. Thanks very much.
I pointed that out at the time. The Hutchin was not a report. The Hutchin observations gave the clear impression that the IWA had the colour of right to protect its bargaining unit jobs against the...
That's right.
In the contract.
Yeah. And you see, and again, it wasn't black and white. He basically said, look, if there's dispute, arbitrate the question.
That's what he said. Okay, off you go and quit your job in the BC Federation of Labour, but not until you've made yourself a properly appropriate martyr.
Okay, will you come to the convention for a day?
Yeah, I'll come for a walkabout and see if anybody's talking to me.
Okay.
I'll be back after the break. He's here. You're there. I'm here. Over this side, Paddy.
Yes, sir.
You were formed at the time of this bylaw caper, weren't you?
Before that, Jack, a couple of years before, we were quite alarmed with the original initiative. Things were going on. Which way?
So you're basically concerned with Indian fishing rights on the coast?
I'm basically concerned that they're going to reallocate commercial rights on the coast. And that's just about the same.
You got to be careful you don't sound like a racist.
Every 2 minutes.
That is, that's a hard line that gets hurled, and it's a real difficult one to
What do I
duck.
regard as your hometown? The Skeena River? Of Skeena?
Might as well, yes.
Skeena.
I live in Comox, actually.
Yeah, but your camp's on the Skeena.
That's right, lower Skeena River, 200 miles from Telegraph Creek.
7.
Now, I've got two fishing issues which I think are almost connected. I have not yet tackled this problem when the federal government started to grant bylaws for Indians on rivers in British Columbia. But the Pacific Fishermen's Defense Alliance has been speaking out about it, and they represent just about every group except the union, UFAW, and the Native Brotherhood. And here tonight from the Pacific Fishermen's Defense Alliance is Paddy Greene. Now, over here is Bob Gould, whose fishing place is on the lower Skeena River, not that far from Telegraph Creek. And he's got a complaint he wants to tell you about, by which he's being put out of business by federal money to other people on the lower Skeena. Well, let's go to you, Paddy Greene. I thought that when Crombie or whoever it was brought in these bylaws, which you felt discriminated against non-Indian fishermen, that they'd all been held up by courts and were no longer a problem.
They were held up by courts. They're before the courts right now on appeal, Jack.
Now, what is your concern, therefore, about fishing rights on the coast here?
By these bylaws, a minister of the Crown causes the sovereign right of Canada is divested, piecemeal divestment of the sovereign authority over fish. By one minister of the Crown's actions, this thing happens, and it's totally wrong and it's totally warped.
What you're saying is that you're complaining against the development of Indian commercial fisheries on the rivers.
That's right, Jack. There is existing fishery that is going on now. There's a food fishery that we're not opposed to. We think it's appropriate, but the pie is only so big. There is not room to start a whole new user group on the river.
Where is this going to show itself most? Didn't you have an argument with the Nishka some time ago?
Well, not with the Nishkas, it was with the Gitskans this summer. The Nishka case is another one coming in where they're dealing under the table in a sub rosa manner or behind closed doors, and they're talking about negotiating away total allowable catch, part of the fish that is presently being caught by the commercial industry, and they're dealing it away under the table. We think that's inappropriate.
Who's they and under whose table?
Well, primarily Indian Affairs, bureaucrats in central Canada. And what we're saying is the process should be opened. Everybody should know what's going on. And let's deal with it in an open matter instead of hiding it.
As far as these Indian bylaws are concerned right now, they're under an appeal. But the intent of the bylaws was to give the certain Indian groups total control of the inland fishery on the rivers.
That's correct. This was in the Skeena River, and it was looked on upon as a pilot. And it took away the authority of the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and turned that sovereign authority of Canada over to the Indian people, rather than leaving it for all Canadians.
You haven't won that battle yet, though, have you?
No, it's cards are out.
Okay, now Bob Gould has a fish processing plant, a freezing plant on the lower Skeena River. How long have you been up there?
We went there in 1979, spring of 1979.
And you've been operating continuously since then?
Yes.
Now I understand from you that your operation has been threatened by what you regard as very unusual actions. What happened?
Not threatened, Jack, destroyed by 5 departments, federal government departments last spring. They financed native takeover of the river.
You have to be a little more detailed than that. Is yours a private company, or is yours a co-op, or are you shareholders, or what?
We're a private company with fishermen as shareholders.
And why did you start the camp up in the lower Skeena? Was it to establish Canada's claim to sovereignty on the fish coming down the Skeena?
Well, basically the problem was with Canada and the United States had a battle over whose fish were whose coast-wide. The position, Paddy Greene was in fact involved in it, was to fish on the transboundary rivers to get their attention. We are the people who actually went and did that.
All right now. And you set up your freezing camp up there, you freeze it and all that. How much money you got involved in it?
Personally, $200,000 or $300,000, but the total value is well over $1.5 million.
And are you making the big money, or are you just getting by?
The most money we've ever made so far is $7,000 a year.
Each?
Each.
Among the 12 of you?
Well, among the 12 of us, our employees have made substantially more than that.
Now, some of your employees are Indians?
Yes, they were.
And shareholders. They're the Toltans.
We have 2 Toltans as shareholders of the company.
All right. What were the 5 government departments doing that caused you to tell me they have destroyed your operation?
The government departments collectively funded a new fishery on the river. They issued 5 or 6 new licenses. They financed the construction and building of boats. They financed the purchase of nets and gear, hiring of employees, hiring of deckhands by monthly salary. They bought fuel and assisted in putting a barge fly-out fish operation within a mile of us.
And has that really cut your throat?
Well, there's only so many fish, as Paddy Greene says. If there's 100 fish, that cut them in half.
But why shouldn't it? Well, these are the Indians who are doing this.
Well, it's a collective, local white men and Indians.
A collective of white men. Why shouldn't they do it? Just because you were there first doesn't mean that you should have a monopoly forever on the Skeena.
Well, we have no worries about the idea that we have a monopoly. We've always wanted everybody to participate in our facilities, and we feel that fair competition would be fair. However, this isn't fair competition funded by my tax dollars to destroy me personally.
What do you think of that one?
I think he's entirely correct. And Jack, what's happening here is a microcosm of the recommendations of the Coolican Report, which basically says British Columbia won't negotiate with the Indian people, which I think is not true, and they're implementing this report up in the bush where nobody knows what's going on, and I see parallels drawn for what they're doing to Bob Gould's operation and what the future might hold for the commercial fishery in British Columbia.
Who was Coolican? What report was that?
That's a report commissioned by a task force by Crombie. It came out last year, and it was an absolutely outrageous report. And it recommended giving federal lands and fish to Indian people because of the attitude of the provincial government. Said they wouldn't come to the table, and so the best way to deal with it is to give fish in federal lands, which is parks in British Columbia, and we know where the fish is.
What steps have you taken to object to this subsidization of competition, which is destroying your business?
We started negotiations originally with the Tall Tans 2.5 years ago to become partners with us. During last winter is when they raised the money to destroy us, and since then we've contacted all government departments involved. We have made presentations, 5 different presentations on ways of resolving the problem. As of last week, we have been turned down flat across the board. They challenged us to do what we can.
So you're just kind of left high and dry.
Not only that, they are aggressively challenging us to do something about it.
Such as what?
Come on the Jack Webster show, I assume.
Oh, I suppose so. Never thought of that. Am I used sometimes as a propaganda outlet? I would hate to think so. Questions to Paddy Greene, excuse my cold, and Bob Gould after the break. And first to Bob Gould from the Skeena. Are you telling me that after the injunction was sought or given against the new licenses, that the Cabinet had a special meeting in Ottawa to issue licenses up in your area?
Yes, after the Defence Alliance and the provincial government got an injunction against the Skeena River operation. In fact, that happened on between the 15th and the 26th of June this year. And on the 26th of June, the day after our fishery started, the federal government had a cabinet meeting and reissued the licenses on the Skeena River.
It's quite incredible. Go ahead, please. Hello, where are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Carry on.
The biggest problem that I find with this upriver fishery is a quality problem. The way the government's going now, they probably think it makes good economic sense to harvest these rotten fish and get pennies a pound for them. John Fraser, he lost his job over a couple of tins of rotten tuna, but the potential damage to the salmon industry, if there's ever a poisoning with this fish, far outweigh the possible benefits.
Can you explain this to me? I can see what the man means, but what's he talking about?
Yes, well, in front of you, Jack, there's a couple of photographs of fish there. One is a silver bright fish, and another one is a tar paper black one, actually taken to the mouth of the Babine, which is a little bit upriver of where the Gitskans were fishing. But the lower quality is just absolutely amazing. This top fish here reached a price of over $4 a pound in the high seas troll fishery this year. And that same fish down below there, the Indians were bootlegging them for $2 a piece. It's a real economic loss, and it's a much lower quality fish.
You're suggesting that the fish should be caught in the sea?
Well, wherever possible, it should definitely, just for the economic benefits now.
Never thought of that.
I don't know. The other aspect of this is that both native and white fishermen out in the water, we've paid a small fortune for this privilege to sell salmon. And now the federal government seems to be able to just give this privilege away, and, there's very little economic benefit.
Okay, does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes eminent sense, Jack.
Next call. Go ahead, please.
Hello. 2 questions. One to the fellow from Skeena.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the fellow from Skeena received some federal money to start up his operation.
Did you? How much money did you get?
Yes, we did. This is something that has been explained by numerous people who have no idea what they're doing. We went to the Skeena prior to anyone being there. There was no fishermen, there was no processors. BC Packers had pulled out of the river. We established a fish processing facility there when there was no one around. What we're complaining about is we were around, federal government, without consulting us at all, put us out of business, basically.
How much did you get initially when you were up there showing the flag on the Skeena?
I think we got 3% of our total capital costs to date.
How much was that?
$74,000.
That sounds smaller, $74,000. Okay, much obliged. Next one. No, but you're a pioneer up there then.
Roger.
Go ahead for mission.
Yeah, hello, Mr. Webster. Okay, one question is, let's see, we got the sockeye run that came through this year, and I mean a big run. They let the seiners in for number one at the mouth of the river. Now, I work on the river, and you got a lot of complaints from a lot of the particular people that are fishing that particular river. Now, they say they didn't take any steelhead and all these other type of fish and whatnot.
Listen a minute, what river are you talking about?
The Fraser River, sir.
Fraser River. Does it
Yes,
make
sir.
any sense to
Yes, and now they're going to turn around and put up the licenses. You got to hear the people crying out here.
you? Are you a gill netter?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm just a private individual that fish the river, and
You're just a fisherman.
you got it.
A sports fisherman.
Pardon me?
A sports fisherman.
You got it, and they're sure blaming the sports fishermen. I don't
They
think
probably
it's the sports
should.
fishermen, sir.
I don't know if it's your fault or not. They're not going to talk about sports fishermen. Who cares about sports fishermen? Go ahead, please.
Hello, I got a question for Mr. Greene.
Just a minute. You better say something to the sports fishermen.
The sports fishermen have a very valuable and appropriate place in the fishery, and I think everybody cares what happens there, and they've been quite responsible for the most part as well, Jack.
Oh, I apologize for my offhandedness with that very nice fella. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, a question for Mr. Greene. As I understand it, some of the Indians and the sports fishermen have been meeting up on the Skeena River trying to work out the dispute, and I was just wondering, have the commercial fishermen thought of getting in on those discussions and trying to work out something? Because I have a friend who's a sportsman up there, and he says that the Indians and the sports fishermen are getting along pretty good right now.
Yeah, I know what they're talking about. They had a meeting recently in Smithers. There already is in place a board called the Skeena River Advisory Board that has been operating with all the user groups, Indian, sports, fishermen, commercial, for a number of years and has been quite successful. What is happening up in the Skeena now, there's a group in the Skeena, and Mr. Neil Sterritz have been working and trying to readjust the regime. Mr. Sterritt is still asking for exclusive control for the Gitskans in that area. We were told by the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans that he was not going to balkanize British Columbia on a stream-by-stream basis, and on those grounds, we did not participate in those meetings up in Smithers. We wanted to deal with British Columbia as a whole in a principle rather than balkanize it up in every little system up and down the coast.
Which minister are you talking about?
Mr. Siddon.
Tommy Siddon.
That's correct.
How's he shaping up?
Not very well, Jack.
Bit slow or what?
I think he is getting poor advice that he's not from some people. 85% of the industry has given him what I thought was very good advice. He's choosing not to ignore it, and I hope that perhaps he'll come around and take a second look at where he is going.
Fair enough. Now, how much time have we got? Oh, go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you, Jack?
That's me, yes, go
Yes,
ahead.
I'd like to ask a question. I just wonder if your guest buys any Indian food fish on the Skeena River, because it is a very remote area, and I should imagine the native people have great difficulty in selling their fish on the, if they are selling fish on the river. I just wonder if your guest buys any native food fish.
What do you mean for his plant?
Or his plant.
There is no native food fishery within 200 miles of us. The nearest native village is 200 miles upstream. We are immune from most of that stuff. That's more of a southern coast thing.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes. This question actually is directed at Paddy Greene. I was up at the Babine River, and there was a bunch of sports fishermen up there, and Indians as well, and they had no trouble. They all got along fine, shared the equipment and stuff. But Paddy Greene had a big fat ass.
Forgive me, Tom. I don't know what happened to him. I hope he collapsed. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Hello, Jack. This is a comment directed at actually both of your guests. I think I may have a solution to the Indian fishing problem altogether. It's that when they do, they should have all the Indian fishing rights they want. However, it should be only for food, as it is now. And they should also be required to use Indian fishing techniques which were in place before the arrival of the white men, such as weirs, cedar nets, and the like. At present, they use all modern techniques, and this is where the problem is.
No, I think he's oversimplifying the problem a little bit. I'd just like you to recap. Your concern is a simple one. Your concern is that you're being put out of business by grants of federal money and licenses which you feel should not have been given out.
Basically, no, Jack, my concern is if the land claims issue has to be settled on the West Coast or any place in Canada, it should not be settled by a small private enterprise or fishermen.
You're saying
or otherwise.
that
We should not pay the price, Jack.
Your livelihood is being used as a bargaining tool to kind of, quote, settle the land claims for the Indians in your part of the world.
Absolutely. That's exactly what they're doing, and that makes the province bear the cost, not the federal government. It's the federal government should bear the costs on these issues.
Do you endorse that?
I think he's correct. The buzzword in Ottawa with the bureaucrats out there is fish is, quote, Indian currency. And I think it's totally inappropriate that sports fishermen and commercial fishermen in British Columbia should be asked to pay the price of land claims. If there's a debt owed to Indian people in British Columbia, is a debt owed by all Canadians and not just the sports and commercial fishermen in BC.
You both really think that the question of allocation of fish under bylaws or anything else is being used by the politicians to placate the Indians on their land claims?
Jack,
Yes.
we believe they're giving them the fishery. They're giving them the fishery that we have built to placate the lands claims issue. That's what we believe. If the lands claim issue is necessarily to be corrected, then somebody has to pay it, and it shouldn't be us as the individuals.
Well, it took me a long while to get around to it, but I finally made it. We'll follow this in future broadcasts. My thanks to Bob Gould from the Lower Skeena River and to Paddy Greene of the Pacific Fishermen's Defence Alliance. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Next, I must have a sharp word with a politician after the break. Ian Waddell is a member of Parliament for a certain minority party in the House of Commons. And I know that Ian won't mind me saying this, but he's a very persistent person. And of course, like any good backbench NDPer, he's got views on almost any subject under the sun, all of them delivered with the same authority as required. So we're sitting here a minute ago and he says to me, "Do you want to talk? What do we talk about, the Bank of BC?" And I said, "No." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because you know absolutely nothing about the Bank of BC. Am I not correct?"
Well, I don't think that's entirely true.
Give me your interpretation of why the Bank of BC is now in the Hong Kong Bank of Canada, subject to all the approvals coming through.
Because I think we're gutless in Canada. I really am concerned about it. I think we were gutless. This is a big deal, Jack.
Repertorially, what happened to the Bank of BC?
In 1 week, old W.A.C. Bennett must be spinning in his grave, you know. I never thought I'd end up quoting W.A.C. Bennett on your program, but he was right in having a bank that was to be a regional development bank controlled in British Columbia. So what have we done? We've given it not to Eastern interests, but to Far Eastern interests.
Why was it necessary? I mean, I'm a simple-minded reporter, not given to indulge in your kind of extravagant hyperbole.
Well, if you're a
Why was it necessary? Because the Bank of BC was going down the tube.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And you had another, well, not completely going down the tube. It's not like those other two Western banks that really fell off. I mean, it was in trouble, but it wasn't bankrupt.
In sore trouble.
All right. It was in trouble and it wasn't bankrupt.
But it was facing some form of liquidation if things continued
as
they were.
And we had
And in the meantime, Edgar Kaiser's lost a bundle of money and his friends when they put in $66 million to try and refurbish the bank a few years ago.
But we, Canadian taxpayers, all of us together, have lost $200 million. We gave $200 million to the bank, the CDIC, the Deposit Insurance Corporation. They get $200 million. They pay $63 million. Not bad.
No. Let me explain it to you again now.
Yeah.
Had the Bank of BC gone into liquidation, it would have cost the CDIC, the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation, a hell of a lot more than $200 million. By putting up the $200 million to the Hong Kong bank, they will now pay $63 for certain assets of the bank, and they'll have $140 million left to cope with any other further losses.
Jack, Van City tells me that they were prepared to offer to buy the bank without asking the federal government to put up that $200 million.
But Van City wasn't an appropriate instrument.
Why not? There are instruments. They're here in British Columbia. You know, years ago, there's a group called the Caisse Populaire in Quebec, which was the credit unions in Quebec. And they invested in Quebec. About 20 years ago they started, and they virtually control their own province now. So what do? We give away a chance to have local control, BC control, and we give it to the Hong Kong bank. And I listened to the commentators, the businessmen and other commentators from Vancouver, and they were on about, you know, we're going to be the Pacific Rim banking center and all this, if I can use the word, sort of horse manure, really. That's putting it mildly. No, we've given away control of a local bank. They've got lots of regional loans to small businesses in the interior.
Yeah, but you see, one of the problems was that the provincial government guarantees all depositors in credit unions 100 cents on the dollar. It was not, quite reasonably, prepared to do the same for all the depositors in the Bank of BC who were only covered by the CDIC $60,000 upper limit.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. But
so it had to be. Besides,
that could have been changed. It was the federal bureaucrats, I'm informed, not the provincial people, that really stopped the takeover of Van City.
I rather like the look of this Hong Kong bank with its connections with Hong Kong. And it might well be that it will help the Pacific Rim Financial Center if it ever comes about.
What?
Don't you agree?
No, I don't agree. I've got nothing against Hong Kong banks or Glasgow banks.
I was just going to accuse you of being racist.
No, if they're Glasgow banks, if there
You're
are
against the Bank of Hong Kong.
No,
You're an NDP, and you are ipso facto racist.
No, I'm not against the
That's
Bank
a joke.
of Hong Kong.
Joke.
All right. I'm not against.
You agree
the bank.
that was a joke?
Yes, yes. And I'm not against the Bank of Glasgow or whatever it's called, Bank of Scotland. But look, we've got a chance to get control of our own development here. And we're not going to have other people do it for us. The Bank of Hong Kong is going to be loyal to their shareholders and their bosses in Hong Kong or in
We've
Singapore.
exhausted that. We're getting boring now.
Well, it isn't over. It isn't over yet.
I was
So
sure
you wait and
glad to see them, the Tories give $350,000 to pay Sinclair Stevens' legal bills in front of the inquiry. Now that was fair, wasn't it?
Yeah. You want my honest opinion? I know people don't like that. Yes, they should be paying his legal bills. We called for an inquiry. They had an inquiry, and he's entitled to good legal counsel. I know that's not a popular position, but I think that's fair.
Socialist MP.
Well,
says
I think it's fair.
We must pay.
Well, I think we asked for the inquiry. We got the inquiry. I think he's entitled to have counsel at the inquiry. If you can't treat the guy any different than you would treat the ordinary citizen, who we should pay.
That's excellent. We've established you have Tory leanings in that question.
No, I'm just being
Are
fair.
you advocating that the icebreaker comes to North Vancouver and Victoria regardless of anything else because of our needs?
We're going to get the icebreaker. I think the general feeling in Ottawa is that we've pretty well got it.
And you believe it should be regardless, should come to the West Coast?
It's about time we got something in the West Coast. Come on, we've been putting, all that money's been going to Quebec and other places.
And are you against these poor multinational drug operators who are trying to make an extra dollar by increasing the patent protection? Are you against these poor people and want to submit the Canadians to generic drugs?
No, but the people are going to have to mobilize and win that issue, like the seniors won the pension issue, Jack.
Well,
That's a big issue. Look, we succeeded all week in stopping that bill in the House of Commons. That was a good victory.
I thought it was great.
Good. Well, then I hope you'll bring some of the seniors on your program next week and get them to talk about the bill.
One of the worst things that Mulroney did was sell our drug industry to the multinationals on the basis of patent protection and a few non-guaranteed jobs in research.
Yeah, it's not too late to change that. I hope.
There's a call here for you.
All right.
Just one, of course.
All right.
Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I have a couple comments regarding the takeover of the Bank of BC.
Yes.
I'd like to point out to British Columbians and Canadians that if in BC for the last 10 or more years there have been two banking-like institutions operating in British Columbia. They've been operating in the same region under the same market conditions. The market's made itself quite clear. One of these institutions is in the process of what looks like bankruptcy, while the other is thriving to the point where it looks like
it might have made a successful takeover bid. If it were not for conservative and social credit governments in Canada and British Columbia interfering in the market on behalf of capitalism and free enterprise, then those institutions, or our system as we know it in Canada, would cease to exist. I'm all for this sort of takeover.
Good.
Not allow hardworking, competent socialists, pinkos, and NDPers to benefit from the market system.
Okay, did you understand what he said?
No, I thought he was being facetious. I thought he was saying that the Van City Savings Credit Union
So did
has
I.
been a success.
So did I.
And
maybe that's what he meant.
Yeah, it's been a success. So why do we sell ourselves so short on this?
Some of us are short naturally and tend to sell ourselves short.
It's be the end of the week, Jack.
Never mind, you're taller than Fotheringham. And I'll be, do forgive me again. And I'll be back after the break. Monday, we've got Jack Kemp, the Minister of Forests, Lands and Forests in BC. Might know something about the Countervail at last and about stumpage duties, of which he's an advocate of increasing. And Eugene Nesmith, President of the Hong Kong Bank of Canada, now including the Bank of BC, at 5 p.m. precisely. Stay tuned for the news hour.